Jake had been stationed on the small alien outpost for 3 months. He was a part of the Earth delegation, sent to maintain peace between the human colonies and several alien species. His job was simple: stay out of trouble, observe, and report. Yet, as the days passed, Jake couldn't help but feel that something big was about to happen. The outpost was a tiny, isolated base on a world unlike any Jake had seen before. The air was thinner, the skies often filled with strange colors, and the wildlife was unlike anything Earth had. The planet wasn't exactly welcoming, but it wasn't hostile either. It was a quiet place, where the different species worked together, or at least, that's what they told Jake. But there was something unsettling about the planet. Something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He had been walking through the corridors of the outpost one day when he first saw her, Lyra. She was unlike any alien he'd ever encountered. She was tall, with long limbs and an elegant presence. Her skin was a smooth shade of silver, almost metallic, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the station. Jake had never been one to believe in love at first sight, but something about her made his heart race in a way he couldn't explain at first. He thought she might be another diplomat or representative from one of the many species that came through the station, but when he spoke to her, she barely responded, her focus solely on something else. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something more to her quiet intensity, energy that seemed to pulse around her. Jake learned that Lyra was part of a species known for their strength, their speed, and their mysterious rituals. The other species on the station spoke of her kind in whispers, mentioning things about mating seasons and fasting that Jake didn't fully understand. As the days passed, he noticed strange changes in her behavior. She became quieter, more focused, almost distant. The other members of the outpost seemed to avoid her, and Jake was left to wonder why. She wasn't violent or rude. In fact, she was polite, but she always seemed like she was holding something back. Jake wasn't one to pry into the personal lives of others, but his curiosity about Lyra grew. He wanted to understand her, to know more about the culture she came from. He spent hours in the station's library, searching for any information on her species. What he found only made things more confusing. There were mentions of fasting and rituals, but the texts were vague. Most of them were warnings. One evening, as Jake stood near the observation window, watching the twin moons rise over the alien landscape, he saw Lyra again. She was standing by the window on the other side of the room, her figure silhouetted against the strange sky. The soft light from the moons made her skin glow, and for a moment, she looked almost otherworldly. Jake watched her for a long time, wondering what she was thinking, what was going on inside her mind. He had heard the rumors. The other humans on the base spoke in hushed tones about the mating season, a time when Lyra and others of her species went into a deep, almost trance-like state. During this time, they fasted, becoming incredibly strong and focused. Jake didn't know if the rumors were true, but there was something about her that made him believe they might be. As the days passed, Jake found himself growing more fascinated by Lyra. He had to admit, he wanted to know more. But he also felt a sense of caution. There were rumors about what her kind did during their mating season, things that were best left unspoken. No one really knew if the rumors were true, but there was an air of fear that surrounded the topic. One afternoon, while Jake was taking his usual walk through the corridors, he bumped into Lyra once more. This time, she wasn't avoiding him. She stood in front of him, her silver eyes locked onto his. "You seem curious," she said softly. Her voice was low, almost melodic, and it made Jake's heart skip a beat. Jake didn't know what to say. He had never been good with words, especially not around someone as mysterious as Lyra. But before he could respond, she spoke again. "The mating season is soon," she said, her voice serious. "You should know that it is a time of change, a time when strength is tested." Jake blinked, trying to understand what she meant. "Change?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Change for both of us." Before Jake could ask more, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, his mind racing. What did she mean by that? What? Was she talking? About the ritual? Or was there something more to it? He watched her disappear down the hallway, feeling a strange mix of fear and anticipation. One thing was certain. Jake's life on the outpost was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The days following Lyra's strange words left Jake with more questions than answers. He couldn't stop thinking about Hearth away. She had looked at him with those glowing silver eyes. The way her voice had sounded so serious when she spoke of the mating season. What did it mean? Was it something he should worry about? Jake had always prided himself on staying focused, keeping his emotions in check. But something about Lyra was different. She wasn't like the other aliens he had met on the outpost. She was quiet, mysterious, and powerful in a way that was hard to define. He spent his days working, trying to keep his mind off the strange thoughts swirling in his head. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Other members of the outpost were starting to talk more openly about the mating season. They spoke of it in hushed tones, their words filled with a mix of fear and fascination. They had all heard the stories of Lyra's species, how they prepared for this time of year with fasting and rituals that were meant to bring out their greatest strength. Jake tried to learn more about these rituals, but the information was scarce. Most of the texts in the station's library were vague or outdated. It was clear that very little was known about the specifics of Lyra's species' mating season, and what little there was only added to the mystery. The rumors of their strength, their ability to transform during the fasting period, and their intense rituals had been whispered among the crew for weeks. It wasn't until Jake saw Lyra again that he began to understand. He had been walking through the central corridor one evening when he saw her standing at the far end of the hallway. Her silver skin shimmered in the dim light, and there was something different about her. She looked thinner, more focused, as if she had shed her previous self and was preparing for something. Jake approached cautiously. He had noticed changes in her behavior over the past few days. She had become more distant, her movements more deliberate, as if she was preparing for something important. "Lyra," Jake called out, his voice hesitant. She turned slowly, her silver eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "Jake," she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of calm that contrasted with the tension in the air. "It begins soon." Wasn't sure what to say. He had always prided himself on being able to handle tough situations, but something about Lyra made him feel out of his depth. He had no idea what she meant by it, or how to react. "What begins?" Jake asked, his curiosity overcoming his hesitation. "The fasting," she said. "The rituals. The change." Jake didn't know what to make of her words. He had heard rumors of these rituals, but hearing it from Lyra herself made it all the more real. He could feel the weight of her words in the silence that followed. "Are you ready?" Jake asked, not knowing if he was asking about the rituals or about her readiness for the change. Lyra nodded. "I have prepared," she said. "The fasting will make me stronger. It will bring out what lies beneath. This is how my kind becomes our true selves." Jake couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and fear. He had never met anyone like Lyra before. She was beautiful, powerful, and completely foreign to him. She had her own rituals, her own way of life, and he didn't know how to navigate it. "Is there anything ... I should know?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra paused for a long moment, her eyes studying him with an intensity that felt almost unnerving. "You will see," she said finally. "You will witness the change. When the time comes, you will understand." Jake was confused. What did she mean by that? What change? He couldn't stop himself from asking, "What's going to happen to you?" She smiled, but there was a strange, almost sad look in her eyes. "I will become who I was meant to be. It's what we all must do during the mating season. It is a time of strength, of power. It is when we prove ourselves." Jake didn't know how to respond. He had never been a part of something like this, never been close to an alien culture so different from his own. But he couldn't deny the fascination he felt. Lyra was unlike anyone he had ever met, and the idea of witnessing such an intense ritual made him both excited and scared. As the days passed, Jake watched as Lyra's behavior became even more focused. She barely ate, spending most of her time in meditation or preparing for what was coming. The other aliens on the base seemed to avoid her, as if they were afraid of what would happen when the fasting was complete. Jake's thoughts were a whirlwind. He knew that he was being drawn into something far beyond his understanding, something that could change his life in ways he couldn't predict. And yet, despite his fear, he couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. What was it about her that captivated him so? Was it her beauty, her strength? Or was it something deeper, something that called to him in a way he couldn't explain? As the day of the ritual approached, Jake found himself increasingly torn. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for certain. His life on this outpost was about to change forever. The day Lyra spoke of her fasting and rituals had left Jake with more questions than he could answer. For the next few days, he stayed focused on his work at the outpost, trying to ignore the growing sense of curiosity and unease that he felt every time he thought about her. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing something he shouldn't be, something deeply personal to Lyra and her species. Jake tried to distract himself by getting involved with the other crew members. They talked about the upcoming events, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about Lyra's species and their strange customs. The humans on the base had been speculating for weeks about the mating season. Some said it was a time of incredible power, while others whispered that it was dangerous and that no outsider should ever get too close. The rumors painted a picture of Lyra as a powerful, mysterious figure who should be feared during this time. Despite the rumors, Jake couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. He was drawn to her in a way that confused him. She was different from the others, her calmness, her strength. The mystery surrounding her rituals made her impossible to ignore. Every time he saw her, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. He wanted to understand her more, but he didn't know how to approach her without overstepping any boundaries. Then, one afternoon, as Jake walked through the hallways of the station, he saw her again. She was standing near the entrance to one of the outer rooms, her silver eyes scanning the space in front of her. There was an air of quiet intensity about her, but today, something was different. She looked less distant, more present, as if she had made a decision without thinking. Jake approached her. "Lyra," he called softly. She turned to face him, her gaze softening when she saw him. "Jake," she said in her usual calm voice, "you've come." Jake wasn't sure what to say. He felt nervous, but at the same time something inside him told him that this was a moment he couldn't let slip away. I wanted to check on you," he said. "How are you feeling?" Lyra smiled, though it was more of a faint curve of her lips than a full smile. "I am ready," she said simply. "The fasting is complete, and the ritual is about to begin." Jake wasn't sure what she meant by that. He had heard of the fasting, of course, but hearing her speak about it so matter-of-factly made it feel even more real. He could see the change in her, the way she held herself, the way her movements were slower but more deliberate, as if she was preparing for something significant. "I've been wondering, ... double quotes," Jake began, hesitating for a moment. "What exactly happens during the ritual?" Lyra studied him for a moment, as though deciding whether to explain. Finally, she spoke. "The ritual is different for each of us," she said. "It is a time when we are tested, a time when we prove our strength not just physically, but in every way. Our endurance, our willpower, and our ability to survive." Jake listened carefully, trying to absorb everything she was saying. Had heard rumors about the ritual, but hearing it from her directly made it all the more real. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. It was clear that Lyra took this seriously. This was a life-changing event for her and her people. "I don't understand," Jake admitted. "How can someone be tested like that? It sounds... He struggled to find the right word. Intense." Lyra's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Jake felt like she was looking at him not as an outsider, but as someone worthy of being trusted. "It is intense," she agreed, "but it is necessary. For us, it is the only way to ensure that we are ready for the future. For what comes after." Jake didn't know how to respond. He could feel the weight of her words, but at the same time he didn't fully understand. What came after? What was the purpose of all this? Before he could ask, Lyra stepped closer to him. Her presence was overwhelming, and Jake felt a flutter of nerves in his chest. He had never been this close to her before, and there was something about the way she stood before him that made him feel both small and important at the same time. "You want to know more?" Lyra asked, her voice low and steady. "You want to see what happens during the ritual?" Jake was taken aback by her question. "Yes, but I don't want to intrude. This is personal to you." "I don't want to be You will not be intruding," she interrupted. "It is not just for me. It is for all who live on this planet, for those who will witness the change. The ritual is not meant to be hidden away. It is meant to be shared." Jake felt a rush of emotions. She was asking him to be a part of something that few others had seen. It was a strange invitation, one that made him feel both honored and uneasy. I don't know what to say," Jake confessed. "This is all so new to me." Lyra's expression softened, and she placed a hand gently on his arm. "Say nothing," she said quietly. "Just be here. The rest will come when the time is right." That, she turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing in the hallway, his mind spinning. He hadn't expected this invitation, and he wasn't sure what it meant. But one thing was clear: Lyra's ritual was about to begin. Whether he was ready or not, he was going to be a part of it. Jake stood still for a moment, staring after Lyra as she walked away. His thoughts raced, his heart pounding in his chest. She had invited him to witness the ritual, something he still didn't fully understand. What would he see? What did the test involve? And why had she chosen him to be a part of it? The days passed slowly, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Lyra had become more distant, her focus entirely on the upcoming ritual. She spent most of her time in silence, preparing in ways Jake couldn't understand. He noticed that she had grown even stronger, her posture more rigid, her movements more controlled. There was a certain intensity about her that he hadn't seen before. Jake couldn't deny his curiosity. He wanted to know what it meant to go through the ritual, what it meant to be tested in the way Lyra had described. But at the same time, a part of him felt nervous. He wasn't sure if he was ready to see something so personal, something so intense. The night before the ritual, Jake sat alone in his room, trying to prepare himself. His thoughts kept returning to Lyra, her strength, her beauty, and the mysterious way she spoke of her people's traditions. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to be part of this world, but it seemed as if fate was pulling him in, whether he liked it or not. The next morning, Lyra appeared at his door. She didn't say anything at first, just gave him a quiet nod and gestured for him to follow her. Jake felt a wave of nervousness wash over him, but knew that he couldn't back out now. He had agreed to be a part of this, and now there was no turning back. They walked together in silence through the station. As they reached the outer courtyard, Jake saw that it had been set up for the ritual. Strange symbols were painted on the ground, and alien artifacts were scattered around the area. The air felt heavier here, charged with energy. Jake could feel it in his chest, a strange vibration that made him aware of how different this place was from the rest of the station. Lyra stopped at the center of the courtyard and turned to face Jake. Her silver eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Jake saw something new in them. There was no fear, no hesitation, only purpose. "This is the test," Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "You must face me. You must prove that you can endure. Only then will you understand."
Ow.
Jake's heart raced. He wasn't sure what she meant, but the look in her eyes told him that this wasn't just a physical challenge. There was something deeper at play here, something beyond strength. "Endure what?" Jake asked, his voice a little shaky. Lyra's gaze softened, but there was still an edge to her tone. "Endure the change. Endure the power. It is not just about winning. It is about understanding what it means to be tested, to survive." Before Jake could ask more questions, Lyra stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful. She raised her hands, and the air around them seemed to shift. The strange symbols on the ground began to glow softly, and Jake could feel the energy around them grow stronger. It was as if the very ground beneath him was alive. "Prepare yourself," Lyra said. Jake braced himself, unsure of what was to come. He had no idea how he was supposed to compete with her. He wasn't an alien, and he certainly wasn't as strong as she was. But there was something inside him, something primal, that told him he couldn't back down. This was his moment, his chance to prove something to both Lyra and himself. As Lyra began her movements, Jake instinctively followed. She moved with a speed and strength that took him by surprise. Her strikes were quick, precise, and powerful. Jake tried to match her, but it was clear that he was out of his depth. Every time he tried to block or dodge, Lyra was already one step ahead. But Jake didn't give up. He couldn't. He pushed his body harder, feeling his muscles burn as he fought to keep up. There was a determination inside him that he hadn't known existed. He realized that the test wasn't just about fighting Lyra physically, it was about enduring, about pushing himself past his limits. As the challenge continued, Jake felt something shift inside him. His body grew tired, and his mind started to cloud with doubt, but he kept fighting. Every strike, every move was a test, and with each test, he felt a little stronger. He wasn't sure if he was winning, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was still standing, still going. Lyra's movements slowed, and she stepped back, her breathing steady. Jake, on the other hand, was gasping for air, his body aching from the effort. He was exhausted. But there was a feeling of accomplishment that filled him. He had endured. "You have passed the first part of the test," Lyra said, her voice softer than before. "You are stronger than you think." Jake looked at her, surprised by her words. He had expected to fail, but something inside him had shifted. He had faced his fear, his doubts, and had pushed through them. And in doing so, he had proven something to himself. Lyra's expression softened even more, and she nodded. "The ritual is not just about strength," she explained. "It is about resilience, about testing your limits. You've shown me that you can endure. You are ready to understand the rest." Jake wasn't sure what to say. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew that whatever it was, he was ready for it. The test wasn't over, but he had passed the first part, and that was enough for now. Jake sat down on a nearby stone bench, his body aching from the intense test of strength he had just endured. His muscles were sore, and his breath came in short gasps, but there was something else inside him, something that felt more than just physical exhaustion. It passed the test, or at least that's what Lyra had said, but he wasn't sure what it meant. What was he being prepared for? What came next? Lyra stood a few feet away from him, her eyes still glowing faintly in the soft light of the courtyard. Her posture was calm, her movements controlled, as if the challenge hadn't affected her at all. Jake, on the other hand, felt drained, as though the weight of the entire ritual had pressed down on him in ways he couldn't explain. "You did well," Lyra said, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. She stepped closer, her eyes studying him with a mix of approval and something else, something deeper that Jake couldn't quite understand. "I didn't think I could keep up," Jake admitted, still trying to catch his breath. "I'm not. Like you, I'm not. I don't have your strength." Lyra tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "It's about resilience. It's about pushing through when you want to stop. That's what I saw in you." Jake's heart raced at her words. He had never thought of himself as particularly strong, at least not in the way Lyra was. Her people were known for their immense power, their ability to endure in ways humans could not. But hearing her speak of resilience made him realize something. He had something that went beyond physical strength. He had a will to fight, a drive to keep going, even when he felt like he couldn't. "But why did you choose me?" Jake asked, his voice uncertain. He had been wondering that for days. Ever since Lyra had first spoken to him about the ritual. Why him? There were so many others at the station more capable, more skilled. So why had she picked him to be a part of this? Lyra's expression softened. "Because you have the potential," she said. "I didn't choose you just for your strength. I chose you because you have something that others don't. a willingness to face the unknown, to push past your fears. Jake felt a wave of emotions wash over him. He had always tried to stay strong, but he hadn't realized how much of that strength came from within. He hadn't been prepared to face the unknown, but here he was, standing in the middle of a ritual. That was far beyond anything he could have imagined. But what does it all mean? Jake asked, his voice low. What comes after the test? What happens now? Lyra's gaze grew distant for a moment, as if she was lost in thought. You must choose, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her words. You've passed the first part of the ritual, but it's not over. The real test comes when you must decide whether to accept the change or reject it. Jake blinked, confused. Change? What change? Lyra looked directly at him, her eyes intense and serious. The change that comes with understanding. The change that comes when you accept who you are and who you are meant to become. It is not just about surviving the ritual. It is about becoming something more than you were before. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. What was she talking about? The ritual had already pushed him to his limits. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face anything else. But at the same time, he knew that something deep inside him had shifted. He had faced Lyra's challenge, and he had pushed through. What came next? Could he truly understand what Lyra meant by the change? I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Jake said honestly. I don't even know what the ritual is really about. It feels like I'm just following you, not knowing where we're going. Lyra took a step closer, her presence overwhelming.
Out.
She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. The change doesn't come all at once, she said. It takes time. But you've shown me that you are capable of more than you think. That's why I chose you. Not because you were strong enough, but because you were willing to face what you didn't understand. Jake stood up, his legs still weak from the test. But now, there was a new sense of determination in him. He didn't have all the answers, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for everything Lyra had spoken of. But there was a fire inside him. Now, willingness to push forward no matter what came next. What happens if I accept? Jake asked, his voice steadier than before. Lyra's eyes softened. If you accept, you will begin to understand what it truly means to be tested. To be stronger, not just in body, but in mind. The change will be difficult, but it will lead you to something greater. Jake didn't know what that meant yet, but he knew one thing. He couldn't back away now. He had faced the first part of the ritual, and he had proven to himself that he was stronger than he thought. He was ready to face whatever came next, even if he didn't fully understand it. I'll accept, Jake said, his voice firm. I'll face whatever comes. But I need to know what I'm truly fighting for. Lyra smiled, her expression a mix of pride and something deeper. You are fighting for yourself, Jake, for the strength that lies within you, and for the chance to become something more. As she spoke those words, Jake felt something shift inside him. It was as if he had crossed a line, stepped into a new world where nothing would ever be the same again. But he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Jake sat on the edge of the stone bench, staring out at the alien landscape. The courtyard where he had just faced Lyra's test seemed so different now. The air charged with a strange energy he couldn't quite understand. His mind was a whirlwind, still processing everything that had happened. It accepted the change, but what did that really mean? What was this transformation that Lyra spoke of? He had passed the first part of the ritual, proven that he had the strength to endure, but that was only the beginning. The real test, Lyra had said, was not just about surviving, it was about understanding. But what did that understanding involve? The wind gently brushed against Jake's face. And for the first time since he had arrived on this strange planet, he felt a sense of calm. Noticed until now, it was as if the entire planet was awakening, and he was a part of it. His thoughts were interrupted when Lyra appeared beside him. She was dressed in simple clothing, her silver skin glowing softly in the daylight. Her eyes met his, and for a moment Jake felt as if she could see right through him. He had already learned so much from her, but there was still so much left to understand. Are you ready? Lyra asked, her voice soft but filled with an unmistakable intensity. Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her, trying to gauge what she meant by the question. Ready for what? The transformation? The ritual? The change? He wasn't. Sure, but he knew one thing: he had come this far. Couldn't back down now. I'm ready, Jake said, his voice steady. But I still don't understand what happens next. Lyra smiled, but there was something serious in her expression. The transformation will not be immediate, she explained. It's a process. It's about unlocking something inside of you. It's about tapping into a strength you didn't know you had. And it begins with letting go of what you think. You know? Jake's brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of her words. Letting go of what he knew. What did that mean? He had always believed that strength came from the body, training, endurance, muscle. But now, Lyra was telling him that there was something deeper, something more than physical power. Let go of what you think you know, Lyra repeated, her voice soft but firm. Only then will you begin to understand what true strength is. He felt a strange sense of uncertainty rise within him. How could he let go of something so fundamental to who he was? But as he looked at Lyra, he realized that she wasn't just talking about physical strength. She was talking about something deeper, something he couldn't see but knew was there. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, as if the planet itself was responding to Lyra's words. A sudden warmth spread through Jake's chest, and he could feel something stirring within him. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something deeper, something primal. This is it, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Feel it. Let it in. Jake closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He tried to clear his mind, to focus on the strange energy that was beginning to swirl around him. At first, it felt like nothing, just a vague sense of warmth. But then, it grew stronger. He felt the earth beneath him, the air around him. The very energy of the planet itself. It was as if the entire world was alive, and he was connected too. It wasn't the kind that came from muscles or endurance. This was something different. It was a strength of mind, of willpower, of the ability to endure not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Jake's heart raced as he felt the energy surge through him. It was like a wave crashing over him, filling him with a sense of purpose he had never known. He could feel his body reacting, his muscles tightening, his senses sharpening. But it was more than that. He could feel the connection to the planet itself, to the life around him. It was as if he was no longer just a human on a foreign planet. He was part of the planet, part of something greater. Lyra stepped forward, her presence a calming force as Jake continued to feel the transformation happening inside him. He opened his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the world differently. The colors around him were more vivid, the sounds more intense. He could feel the heartbeat of the planet beneath him, and it was as if he was in sync with it. You are beginning to understand, Lyra said, her voice full of pride. This is the first step in the transformation. You are not just human anymore. You're connected to something greater, something beyond yourself. Jake's mind swirled with thoughts and emotions. He didn't fully understand what was happening. But he knew one thing: he was changing. He was becoming something more than just the person he had been before. He was beginning to tap into a power he had never known, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Jake admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. This is too much, Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm but reassuring. You are ready, she said. The transformation is not about being ready. It is about embracing what lies within you. Trust in yourself, Jake. You have already proven your strength. Now, you must prove your resilience. Jake took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew that he had already crossed a line. He was no longer just an observer in this strange world. He was a part of it. And his hands clenched at his sides as he tried to steady his breath. The transformation that had begun inside him was far more intense than he had imagined. He could feel the change, not just in his body, but in his very spirit. His mind, once clouded with uncertainty, now felt clearer, more focused. But there was something else, something deep inside him that he couldn't fully explain. Lyra stood a few steps away, her presence calm and centered, as always. The energy around them seemed to hum with an intensity Jake had never felt before. It was as if everything in the world was in motion, and he was part of it. He had never felt more alive, more connected to the universe. Yet at the same time, he felt a sense of fear of what was happening to him, what it meant for his future. "You are changing," Lyra said, her voice soft but filled with power. "You've embraced the transformation. You've taken the first step. And now, you are ready to face what comes next." Jake turned to her, his eyes filled with questions. "What comes next?" he asked. "I don't understand. I've felt the change, but—" Lyra stepped closer, her silver eyes locking with his. There was a quiet understanding in her gaze, but there was also something deeper, something that made Jake's heart race. "The change you are going through is not just about strength," she said. "It is about becoming something more. It is about understanding the power that lies within you and accepting it. You are no longer just human. You are part of this world, part of what lies beyond." Jake felt his pulse quicken as her words sank in. He had heard her speak of the transformation before, but hearing it now, in this moment, felt different. He wasn't sure what Lyra meant by becoming something more, but he knew that whatever it was pulling him forward, and there was no way to stop it. "I don't know if I can do this," Jake admitted, his voice shaky. "I've always been just a human. Now I feel like I'm something else. I don't know if I'm ready to embrace that." Lyra's gaze softened, and she reached out to place her hand gently on his arm. "You don't have to be ready," she said. "The transformation doesn't happen because you are ready. It happens because it is meant to. You are meant to be more than you were before." Jake felt her touch, and a strange warmth spread through him, not from her physical contact, but from the power that seemed to radiate from her. It was as if she was opening something inside of him, something that had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. "I don't understand," Jake whispered, his voice filled with frustration. "What is it that you want from me? Connection we have? Why am I the one you chose for this?" Lyra's eyes softened even more, and she stepped closer. She stood directly in front of him now, their faces only inches apart. The air between them seemed to thrum with energy, and Jake could feel the pull of it. The undeniable connection that had grown stronger between them. "You were chosen because you have something others don't," Lyra said quietly. "You have a strength that is not just physical, but mental. You have the ability to endure, to survive, and you have a heart that is capable of more than just survival. You are capable of love." Jake blinked, caught off guard by her words. "Love," he repeated, his voice a little shaky. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," Lyra smiled, her expression filled with both tenderness and strength. "Love is not just an emotion, it is a bond, a connection that goes beyond everything else. It is a force that ties us together, that gives us strength even in the darkest times. It is the power that drives us to become more than we ever thought we could be. That is what this is about, Jake." Jake stood there, processing her words. He had never thought about love in the way she described it. He had always seen it as something simple, something that people felt and expressed, but Lyra was telling him that it was a force, power that could change the very course of his life. "Are you saying that we are connected by love, Jake?" "Yes, but not just in the way you might think. The love between us is not about possession. It's not about being bound to each other by the rules of your world. It is about the connection we share, the strength we give each other. It is the bond that has been forged through the transformation." Jake's heart raced as the truth of her words began to sink in. It was more than just physical strength. It was more than just surviving the challenges Lyra had placed before him. It was about something deeper, something that reached into his soul and changed him in ways he couldn't explain. "You have become part of me. Just as I have become part of you," Lyra continued, her voice steady and filled with certainty. "The transformation was only the beginning. Now we are linked in ways that go beyond words." Jake looked at her, and for the first time he understood. This wasn't just about surviving a test. This was about a connection, a bond that tied him to Lyra in ways he couldn't fully explain, but he felt with every fiber of his being. "I think I understand now," Jake said quietly. "This connection, this change, it's more than just about power. It's about being a part of something greater than ourselves. It's about love." Lyra smiled softly, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes, Jake. And now you are ready to face the future." "Together," Jake nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a human from Earth. He was something more. Something connected to Lyra and this strange world in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. And whatever came next, he was ready to face it, with Lyra by his side,